Hola, we are back. It's Thursday, and we are coming with you or at you with the UFC.
Whoa.
Jesus fucking
Settle
Christ.
down. I'm getting a bit too excited. I always get excited at the start of these. Well, UFC Fight Night Font versus Vera this Saturday night. Sean Sheehan is with me. Sean Denny is with me. Harry Powell is with me to talk all things UFC. But before we get into the action, I want to introduce everybody to our sponsors, Eat All Real Nutrition Bars. EatAllReal.com. Enter the code word SevereMMA. Get yourself 15% off these bad boys here. You'll see all what to do down at the very bottom, scrolling all stream long. So we're heading into another UFC Fight Night card. This is probably not the best cards overall, let's be real. A decent main event, interesting main event between Rob Font and Marlon Vera. I'm going to come to you first, Sean Sheehan. And I want to find out, you're famously said in the past about Marlon Vera, I might be wrong with the exact quote. I said, a glorified journeyman, I believe you called him before. Is he still that?
Did I say glorified?
I don't know. Probably not.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Speakers Corner, lads. We'll talk about Journeyman.
Oh, we will. Is that been out? Is that out? Yeah, next week.
Yeah,
Next
it's
week,
out. Is it not?
Is it out? Is it out? Oh,
No,
it
it's
is out.
out.
Yeah,
It's
it is
out.
out. Yeah, it is out. Yeah, I'm not like Marlon Vera is an effective fighter for what he does, I just don't think what he does is very good in terms of like a top level fighter. I think what Rob Font does is very good in terms of a top level fighter. Now, the problem is you have Jose Aldo in that division, you have DJ Dillashaw, you have Petr Yan, you have Aljamain Sterling. There are lots and lots of top level fighters in that division. And that's why someone like Font in that division is, 5 or 6 in the rankings. I don't think Chito Vera is a guy who could get that high. I don't think he's a guy who is that good. And that's a harsh thing to say, but I'm also I come on here and lie to you, and not give you my opinion, but that is my opinion. My opinion is he is not that good, but he gets the best out of what he does. I think he fights to a certain pace early that is a pace that he is comfortable with, but that he makes other people uncomfortable in, which they always say about you punch a black belt in the face and he becomes a brown belt and a purple belt and all of that. But when you punch a very good striker in the face, when you wear out a very good technical fighter, he becomes less technical and less technical and less technical the more tired and tired and tired he gets. And that is a very good and very smart game plan from someone like a Chito Vera. Now, I said at the start, I may have, been a bit harsh on him or, unfair to him.
No,
but he is very good. Sorry,
I don't think you're being harsh.
He's very good at fighting the way a limited fighter should. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I don't think it was harsh as such, because I would agree with you. I think he's a good fighter in regards to how far he's gotten with the level of skill that he has, to be honest. And one thing that I look at is since he's moved to Jason Brillo, and we've seen it time and time again with him. Like, I don't know what you think about this, Sean Denny. Like, we have seen those improvements in his striking game at least, but that being said, he's still a work in progress for me.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like what I think has gotten him so far, he's one of the hungriest fighters you'll ever see. So he's got a very good reason for fighting. His daughter was sick, so he was trying to fight as often as possible early on in the career and getting the money to fund the treatments. But I think though he's about 60% hunger, and about 40% is the rest is literally squeezing every bit of the orange juice out of the orange just to get there. And I think someone like Perillo is very good at keeping that on track and getting the most out of it as well. So I think it's a good synergy between coach and fighter there.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look at in the last fight, or when he went in against Frankie Edgar, Harry, you know, he got the win. It was a fantastic knockout. That the front kick to the face, it was a picture and a meme and everything like that on poor Frankie. You know, it was a bad knockout for him. But the reality and the full story of that fight didn't really play out in what you've seen with the knockout, because Frankie was having some success in that fight, and he arguably won round one. I think he did win round one. Round two was close, and round three was heading towards Frankie as well, if I remember correctly. Like, you know, the knockout kind of papered over a lot of cracks. Would you agree with that, Harry?
Definitely. I mean, going and watching back the fight to do the breakdown and pick my analysis, I think Vera was doing enough in the third round. I think one of the big things that had changed was the power difference. Frankie doesn't hold the same power at 40. I mean, he's never been a super powerful guy, but I think Marlon was the more powerful striker. But to your point, you know, a 40-year-old Frankie Edgar that holds some of the similar, very vague, loose blueprint traits that Rob Font holds, i.e., lots of movement, lots of footwork, lots of shots, and he was absolutely getting to Marlon Vera, and that's a problem if you're Marlon Vera.
It's definitely going to be a problem in this fight as well, because I think that Rob Font does hit harder than Frankie Edgar does as well. But I mean, how do you think that Vera is a big bantamweight, really, isn't he, Harry? And you know, he kind of uses that to his advantage, and we've seen it in a couple of fights in the past. But I mean, if you're getting hit too much, you're going to get found out sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And look, I think both of them are actually pretty sizable bantamweights. I think that Marlon Vera, and Shawnee's already said it, right? He's a very limited fighter. On the feet, everything is sort of one shot, two shot. He's quite a ploddy fighter in that his feet are primed often for power shots. He loves a teep up the middle. He loves leg kicks. If he can get those going against Rob Font, that can possibly sap some of the footwork, some of the movement, some of the cardio of Rob Font. But I think this being Marlon Vera's first 5-round fight, and the fact that we saw Frankie Edgar get to Rob Font, get to Marlon Vera with the footwork and with the volume striking, it is highly likely that we're going to see Rob Font get to Marlon Vera. Now, if you want me to go a bit longer, I'll tell you some of the wrinkles that I think can happen.
I'll just pass it over to Sean. I want to talk a little bit about Rob Font. I'll come back to you, Harry.
Absolutely.
Sean, I want to ask you the question: what do you think the biggest lesson that Rob Font learned in his fight with Jose Aldo? It went all 5 rounds. He was hurt multiple times. You know, it was probably the toughest test of Rob Font's career in regards to fighting an experienced guy and fighting a former champion. And he learned many lessons that night.
Look, there are a few things you can learn from a fight with someone as good as Jose Aldo, especially when, you know, you're winning a part of that fight and then you end up losing the fight. I suppose the biggest thing you can kind of take from it, if you're a fighter, is either a positive or a negative. You can see that level, see the level you reached against that person, and see the level you need to reach to be one of the best fighters in the world. If Font took that from that fight, and he has improved and he's trying to reach that level, as you know, we see in all different sports, a team might come within a few points or a few goal or one goal or close to beating or draw with someone in one game, and then a couple of years later they just have taken that hump to get over him and to win against that person or to win against the world champion, to be the best. Sometimes you need that fight or that matchup in your career to get to a level. Maybe that's it for Rob Font. But if you're taking it as a negative, maybe he's seen the level and thinking, I can't get to that level. I can never fight at that level. And it's going to be one or the other. It really is going to be one or the other. And for Rob Font, I think this weekend will be a test to see if that mentality is still there. Now, against someone like Marlon Vera, I don't think Font would have to be at his best to beat someone like Vera, to be honest. But I'd be interested to see if there was a new wrinkle, something different. Like that fight, I think we talked about it an awful lot after the Jose Aldo fight. And me and Harry, I think, might have even done a specific podcast on it, talking about how great Aldo is, basically, and how he's able to change in like the middle of the fight. What I want to see from Font is, let's say he is winning early, and then he does get a little bit tired, maybe towards the midway point of the fight or something like that. And Chito Vera maybe wins a round or wins a half round or has him hurt at one stage, can he bounce back? And not just bounce back in terms of physically or in terms of, getting into the corner and, getting up for it again. I mean, in terms tactically and technically, because that is where he fell against Aldo. Now, anyone would, because Aldo was so good, but I think it's maybe his opportunity to show that, because I don't think Vera will go away. I don't think Vera will be an easy out or anything like that. And even if he's losing, I think he'll keep fighting and fighting and fighting. So there may be an opportunity in a fight like this, even where I think, and I don't know if the lads agree with me or not, but the sounds of them, I think they do, where it's not necessarily outmatched, Vera is, but I think it's a good matchup for Font. Even in a good matchup, he might have opportunities to show those improvements as well.
Indeed, yeah. In that Jose Aldo fight, Rob Font, anytime he seemed to be kind of getting back into the fight was the time when Jose Aldo connected and hurt him again. And Aldo just showed his experience more so than anything else. Something that Sean, Denny, something that Vera is going to have to do in this fight is adjust to the 5-round fight. So, I mean, he's a pretty in-your-face fighter. He does like to fight at not at 100 miles an hour, but he does like to fight on the front foot and set a decent pace. Do you think in this fight he might backpedal a small bit in the early rounds and kind of just save himself for the championship rounds as such?
Yeah, I think he might be in a bit of trouble in this regard, because Rob Font has basically beaten every style of fighter that you can put in front of him. He's lost fights, but he's beaten grapplers, he's beaten strikers, he's been able to control fights. So I think if Vera goes in with the same aggressiveness, what'll either happen is he might win the first early rounds, but he'll leave himself open to a finish. Or he'll need to play 4 to 25 minutes, and then I think he's probably going to end up getting picked off. It's a small window of opportunity he has in this fight, and I fear if he doesn't get a finish, push aggressively for a finish early, I have a feeling Font is going to use the bigger match experience just to box him out.
Indeed. I think for me, when I was watching, and I'll go to you next, Harry, to get into the meat and the potatoes of the fight, I'm looking forward to hearing your assessment. Font has a very, very good jab. One thing that stood out to me was, and something that he kind of stopped doing against Jose Aldo, and maybe that was because he was maybe getting a little bit dominated in the grappling exchanges when he got hurt, was he actually took Jose Aldo down early in that fight, secured a takedown, which is not easy to do against Jose Aldo. Aldo did pop back up. I think in that fight, what he wanted to do was create a pace over 5 rounds to try and tire Aldo out. And it worked in certain regards. But in the end, when you're getting hit too much and you're leaving yourself open for those big shots, it doesn't really matter what kind of a pace you set, because, he will, like I said to Sean, he will learn many lessons. What do you think he's going to have to do to unsettle Vera in this main event?
Just work, I think, is the honest answer. I think that my assessment of Rob Font, especially in the fights before the Jose Aldo fight, because look, Jose Aldo is Jose Aldo. If Jose turns up and says, I'm going to win tonight, the likelihood is he's probably going to win tonight, and it's very, very hard to turn that man away. Sean and I obviously did the podcast where we broke down, just that Rob Font's a great fighter, but Jose Aldo is just Jose Aldo. But look, if we look at Rob Font as a fighter and we look at the deficiencies and the positives, the deficiencies are his takedown defense purely from if a fighter just shoots on him is relatively good. However, when he gets lulled into a sense of being able to throw that jab, allow his feet to come under him, and lads counter wrestle, and what I mean by that is instead of slipping and throwing shots, they're slipping and throwing takedowns at him. He's getting taken down a lot. Marlon Moraes hit him, took him down 2 or 3 times. Cody Garbrandt took him down 2 or 3 times. And when he gets taken down, his get-up game is good, but it's predictable. He goes with an overtie, which stops strikes coming from one arm, and he generally goes for bicep control, wrist control on the other arm to stop strikes coming in. The problem against Marlon Vera is, the second option that he uses for the get-up is the Kimura, and he used that against Garbrandt. But against Marlon Moraes, he fell in love with looking for the Kimura a little bit too much. That gives up head and arm control. Marlon Vera, he's not a fantastic grappler, but I wouldn't want to be getting into grappling exchanges where I'm diving on Kimuras for get-ups and diving on this and diving on that. We saw in the Marlon Moraes fight both the good and the bad of his get-up game. He uses that Kimura grip or that bicep grip or that wrist grip to allow himself to scoot his hips out and get his feet to post on Marlon Vera's hips. When he does that, Marlon Vera made an immediate read and rode that hip, came into half guard, landed some shots. Now, Font did a good job to gain 2-on-1 wrist control, turn into turtle and get back up. But that's a deficiency for me. The deficiency is if Font is allowed to be on the front foot and Vera can duck under and get takedowns, is Vera able to land damage on the ground? Yes, he is. Part of his game is specifically when he's on his back, he lands lots of shots. He likes elbows. He likes to throw up submissions. He likes to be offensive from his guard. But to me, if I'm Rob Font, I need to be building up the steam over the 5 rounds. And that's something I think is very impressive about Rob Font. It's his ability to settle into the fight between rounds 1 and 2 and then really build up ahead of steam. And against Vera, I think you just outwork him. You outwork him with angles, you outwork him with straight shots, and you outwork him with combinations. As I said previously, and as the lads have already said, Vera is somebody that does set a pace, but it's not a blistering pace. It's a lot of one shots. It's a lot of plodding forward. And he's available to be hit. We've said this before. And I think if you take more than a couple of rounds of shots, you're going to slow down yourself. You're going to not want to get hit, which means movement's going to be available. Does that mean grappling? We're yet to find out. But I think Rob Font has absolutely a fight that he should be comfortably winning here.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I think overall level of skills between the two fighters, I think Rob Font has enough to get it done. I mean, do you think Font has enough to get it done, Sean? Would you see him getting the win here? Do you see the fight going 5 rounds? Personally, I see this being a 5-round fight and Rob Font winning a unanimous decision.
Sean Sheehan.
Sorry.
I don't know. Probably. I think it will be a long fight. As I said earlier on, I don't think Vera will be an easy out. But also, I think there's only so much you can take against someone like Font if you are a fighter of Vera's ability. Now, I think it all comes down really like we saw Limerick and Waterford at the weekend. They got 2 late goals and made it a little bit closer. Can he win a 4th round? Maybe can he win a 5th round and make it look a little bit closer? Can he stick in there? I think he needs to do something like that. And I think it might, it might decide whether the fight is going to decision or a late TKO or KO for Rob Font. Because I think if it's 5 rounds of Font just beating him up and beating him up and beating him up, I think he probably will end up finishing him. But I think I do think Vera will have his purple patches in the fight. I think it will have a few opportunities to push him against the cage. He is smart, and he is tough as well. I think a big key as well to this, and it comes into whether the fight will be a finish or not, is if Font can kind of get the timing of the rush from Vera and is able to land those counter strikes, it could be a very tough night for Vera. Like, I think we see there's a big difference between a pressure fighter like a Marlon Vera and let's say a pressure fighter like Rob Whittaker, who is a magnificent pressure fighter in that he lands beautiful shots when he does it, has massive variation, can do all different sorts of things, or say a counter pressure fighter like a McGregor who steps into that range, steps in, you make one mistake and he throws a left hook and knocks you out, or throws a jab and knocks you out. And, Yoel Romero, a similar sort of one as well, a one shot knockout pressure counter fighter. Vera is more your agricultural Misha Tate type of push you forward, headless, just kill you with pace. And, a fighter of someone say like a Misha Tate was able to make a whole career out of that. And then she added on bits and pieces to it as well. Her striking improved and her jiu-jitsu improved and she became, the champion. I don't see that from Vera, honestly. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the pressure is enough. Sometimes the unbelievable chin is enough. But will it be enough against someone as good as Font? Will there be enough variation there? I think, look, if he had the variation of someone like a Rob Whittaker, this would be a very intriguing matchup for me. And I would love to see how Font would have to deal with that. I just don't think there is that much to deal with for Font. I said it in one of my previous ones. I think it was with Spencer, maybe somewhere else. He's a very good training camp. Rob Font, he's lots of people in there who can walk him down for 50 or 60 rounds of sparring in this camp or whatever it might be, the exact same way as Marlon Vera does. He's not a hard fighter to, if you're fighting, let's say, Wonder Boy or MVP, as see him by me, it's very hard to get a fighter to go in and copy them and be like them. Not so for Marlon Vera. So I think he'll be used to that in training. I think he'll be able to counter him. And I think it's going to be a tough night for Chito Vera, honestly.
I think to add on to that as well, sorry, and if I could just jump in, it's actually hard to replicate Font's style of footwork because he goes from very long to very short. As his confidence builds, he's happy to mix up between stances from extremely short. Against Cody Garbrandt, he was like hitting some crouching tiger type shit footwork, right? And then he goes all the way back out and he's dancing in and he's pretty footing about. Like to that point, I think it's hard to replicate some of the looks that Rob Font can give to.
It is, and I think that movement in and out will be important in this fight as well, to kind of nullify the front kick attack that Vera has, which is it's the one that knocked Frankie Edgar out, and he had other success against Frankie Edgar and other people with it too. He uses it as his rangefinder, but if you can unsettle him with footwork, he ain't going to get that off. The question was asked today, and we'll go on to the co-main event on Twitter. Who is the best gatekeeper of all time in mixed martial arts? And I think we're at a stage right now where Andrei Arlovski is a fucking gatekeeper and a damn good one at that as well in the heavyweight division. Has he done it all of his career? No, he got up there and he fought some top level guys early on in his career, but he's been thereabouts, and he's been fighting his way and building up a good win record in the heavyweight division. And, he deserves his plaudits for that. But he's coming in here after fighting the who's who on a 3-fight win streak. He's only defeated Chase Sherman, Carlos Felipe, and Jared Van Der Aa. Not that great level of fighter. Jake Collier's not that great level of a fighter either, to be honest. And I'm curious, what are the UFC trying to do with Andrei Arlovski right now? That's the question that I have. He says that he's thinking about not legacy or not anything like that. He's thinking about winning a title again. I think that's not going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen. I mean, where do you see Sean Denny? Where do you see Andrei Arlovski at this stage of his career?
He's a journeyman sort of type thing at this stage. Like he's always been streaky. He's always been streaky. Like he'll go on 4 wins, he'll go on 4 losses. He's not the pit bull anymore. He's a poor slow dog now that can outsmart you maybe to
Jack
get
Russell.
to get he'll chase you around for 15 minutes and be able to sort of keep safe now. He's learned how to keep very, very safe, which has done him well against limited opponents, which unfortunately I think Jake Collier is going to be pretty similar. But if you were to put him in against someone slightly better, it's trouble. Like I think he's about 43 now, and he's on a lot of money. Like the UFC has cut so many people like him, and for some reason he's staying around because he must have signed a long-term deal or something.
It's Andrei Arlovski in a co-main event. They're going to promote him as Andrei Arlovski, and a lot of the old school fans will recognize the name and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know. At this stage, if they were trying to get him out, and if he is on a lot of money, they would probably match him a lot harder. Andrei Arlovski is going to stay taking these kind of fights all day if they're offered to him, and why wouldn't he? Because he's gone into a little bit of a decision merchant now, where he'll just like a Jack Russell, he'll nip away at you all fight and just do just about enough. But I mean, a win here, what does a win here do for him, Sean Sheehan? I mean, it's hard to get excited about it. I know he's talking about titles and all that, but that's just dreamers talk, really.
Yeah, a win does nothing for him. A loss doesn't really do much for him either. He's just in that same number, and it's a weird thing with heavyweight. We talked about it the last day when, what's the name of the dude fought with his brothers in middleweight a couple of weeks ago, and we were saying like,
Marcus.
he'll always be number 13, and whoever he's fighting will always be number 7. Or Derek Lewis has been ranked number 4 for the last 15 fucking years. If Overeem and JDS were still there, they'd still be like 11 and 12 or whatever. It's just the heavyweight division. You have Aspinall coming in. Then 2 years before that, you had Cyril Gagne, you've maybe Pavlovich coming now as well. So we've had 3 guys in the last 6 years, and with Francis maybe 6 years ago going in. It's just the same thing over and over and over again, and it's very tough. And I think Sean made a good point there. Like, it's like he's fighting a lot of lads who are probably just not good enough to be there and not good enough to beat him, and he is good enough to be like the leader of the peloton. Let's say, if we want to put it that way. I don't know what Jake Collier though. I think this is an interesting one because and it's a funny thing maybe to say as well. Andrei Arlovsky is due a knockout, if you get me. Like, he's had a lot of decisions. There's always like recently Arlovsky's been like 4 decisions, then he kind of get knocked out, and we're like, oh, he's gone. And then there's like 4 more decisions. I feel, and Collier,
he's some man though, Arlovsky as well, because we were saying he was fucking finished when he was fighting Fedor and he got knocked out as well. Like,
and we were saying he's finished in when he was in World Series of Fighting. We were saying he was finished in as well. I think the one thing Collier has, and I'll throw it over, maybe Harry would have an idea, and this is the fact that he fought down in middleweight, didn't he? I think the fact that he has fought down there is used to fighting guys who are maybe faster than anyone else in heavyweight will be. I think he'll pose a different threat to Arlovsky, because what Arlovsky has over most guys is a very good athleticism. Most guys in that heavyweight division have never fought someone who is able to, even at 43 years of age, throw a jab as well as Andrei Arlovsky or be as technically good. He mightn't be the most powerful in the world, but he also is, as Harry said, very hard to hit, is fast to getting away, can move his feet very well. And you mightn't think of Arlovsky necessarily as a great athlete or as a fast twitch muscle guy or anything like that. But if you think of him in comparison to like the mid-level heavyweight, he absolutely is. I think maybe he's not in comparison to Gagne or Ngannou or John Jones or Stipe, but in comparison to the rest of them, he absolutely is. And I think maybe the fact that Collier is coming up from 2 weight classes down, he's used to fighting faster people. We've seen him getting a few knockouts in the heavyweight division. He can hit hard. I kind of like Collier here, and I kind of like the knockout, to be honest, but an Arlovsky decision is probably the second most likely outcome, or maybe the first.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think what Andrei Arlovsky is a very smart fighter and is not ego-driven at all at this stage in his career. I think he realizes he is coming towards the end. He's not making too many mistakes in fights. He's not putting himself and taking too much risks either, Harry. And like we've all said, is that's why we see him picking these good fight, like, no, I don't know what way of saying that, but that's why we see him in these kind of fights and irking out decisions every single time.
Veteran savvy is a real thing. And I think on the flip side of that, Collier is a fighter that genuinely worries me. You look at the transformation in his body since his time at middleweight to now, and something has gone very, very wrong. And I'd like to know what that is. He was a middleweight who was shredded. As Shawnee has already said, he was quick, he was agile, he could punch, he had some power, he had some grappling in his back pocket if you allowed it. But now, Jesus, he looks like me after I come home from holiday. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not good. And that, to me, it makes me question why he's fighting and what he's fighting for or against. Shawnee and I talked in a podcast that'll probably come out in 17 months, but we talked about fighters generally coming from some form of trauma or fighting to try and battle against some form of trauma. And for Jake Collier, it seems evident that is somewhere near the forefront of his person. Now, these are variables that are very hard to quantify and may have absolutely nothing to do with the way that the fight goes in its entirety. But it's something I certainly question. Now, for the actual tangibles of the fight, I think Sean has an absolutely fantastic point. This really is a question of where are both fighters, right? Is Collier excuse me, sorry, is Collier able to use the superior? I mean, in some ways, I do think he is a better athlete than Andrei Arlovski. Can he get to the speed? Can he rough him up a bit? Can he get inside? Can he make it dirty? Can he force Arlovski to make mistakes? Now, this is a heady example, but we watched Tom Aspinall manage to push Arlovski back against the fence and then have him biting on feints before he's landing shots. Can Collier do something similar? Can he land the big shot that puts Arlovski away? Can he grapple? I would love to see it hit the deck, as Arlovski's no slouch on the ground, but Collier has a really nice rear naked choke and some nice setups to get there. But for Arlovski, really, in his mind, this is, I go in there, it's 15 minutes of me grinding out, pointing out a result, putting a jab in a guy's face, and taking home a nice check, right? And I just, as we've already touched on, and I just want to reiterate that point, this to me is pretty horrendous matchmaking. It feels as though there was nobody that they wanted to promote on this card, so they put Andrei Arlovski in there so they can run a highlight reel of him 15 years ago with some hair on his chest, and that's it. It's not great, you know. It's not great.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I mean, it's not something that gets the juices flowing. And we move on to the next fight. That's, in my opinion, one of the greatest nicknames in MMA right now, and that's Andre Touchy Feely, who goes in there and fights you, Anderson Brito. Feely has, look, he's a guy, I think when he shows up, he's fucking really, really, really good. And when he doesn't, he's really, really, really bad. And we've seen it. We've seen both of those sides to him in his UFC career. Some really good wins. I mean, you're going back to the win in 2020 over Charles Jourdain. That looks damn fucking good right now. Lost a unanimous decision, lost to Bryce Mitchell. That doesn't look too bad, even though it was a loss. The eye poke was unfortunate in the last fight. Wins over Miles Jury as well. He's been in there with some tough competition, and he hasn't been really able to get going so far in his UFC career. I mean, against your Anderson Brito, Sean Sheehan, this is a chance for him to get back and to get back into the win column, in my opinion, if he turns up.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Feely. I often thought he was a guy who was maybe going to take a couple of steps forward and become, not necessarily maybe a championship level fighter or a top 5 or 6 level fighter, but maybe someone who could get within a couple of steps of it. And it just feels like it's maybe never going to happen for him now. And if it does happen, it needs to start happening as quickly as possible. Brito, we've seen him in the UFC once after the Contender Series. Don't know a whole lot about him, but he's good on the ground. Arlovski, Feely he's good wrestling. He's good. Like Feely's a good all round fighter. I think he's another guy who's a pretty good athlete. He's fast. He can get on a choke if he needs to get on a choke. But I think you made a great point there in kind of saying that, like, which Feely's going to turn up. I think, look, if it's Feely at his very, very best, I think he'll probably win here. But can we expect it to be Feely at his very, very best? He fought once in 2021. He fought a good few times in 2020, but it just feels like one of those guys who's kind of fading away in his career. And maybe that's a sad thing to say, but I would love to see him have kind of a re-up in his career. I think he seems like a good guy. He seems like a good character, and he's an exciting fighter as well. I always love to watch an Andre Feely fight, and if he's still with Team Alpha Male as well, I think it's important to have a good Team Alpha Male, because when they were at their best, they were a very, very good gym, and it feels like maybe they have Song Yadong and they have a few other people as well, but maybe it feels like they aren't the super gym they kind of were threatening to be at once. And a win here for Andre Feely might be a good thing as well.
It was actually the point I was going to bring up next was that, Team Alpha Male did have somewhat of a downturn, but they are having a little bit of resurgence. I don't know if they'll ever be as successful as they once were, but a couple of good fighters coming through there. And Sean Denny, you need that in your gym really to kind of draw the best out of you as a fighter. And it'll be interesting to see what Feely comes in and looks like this time. What are you expecting to see in this fight?
I'm sort of expecting to see a decent version of Feely here. He is a man that knows a lot of ways to win a fight, and a lot of ways to lose a fight. But I think his biggest danger here is if he's going in for the takedown. I sort of fear he's going to leave his neck out for Brito to grab, and it seems maybe the most logical path to victory here, because he is that little bit reckless. But he's very, very streaky. He's win loss, win loss, win loss, and he just hasn't been able to put it together. Like as you say with the gyms, I think Team Alpha Male, they just didn't get a few new bodies in where you need fresh blood to keep it circulating. And I think I think Feely's probably been training with a lot of the same guys for too long, maybe, and that they just didn't get the next batch in on time. Whereas I think the next group along might have a bit more success. But unfortunately, I think Feely's starting to turn into somebody like Clay Guida, who we're going to see showing up on these cards time and time again. They'll be entertaining, but they're probably not going anywhere. They're just remaining static.
Indeed. What's your opinion, Harry, on this? Do you think Anderson Brito, lost against Bill Algeo on his UFC debut by decision? Maybe disappointed with that, wasn't the best fights. This is a chance for him to come in and get a win over a name, and a name that a lot of people know as well. And he should be looking to seize this opportunity. Do you see him getting the win, or do you see, is it the general consensus, I believe, this fight, what we've all saying is that this is not down to Anderson Brito, it's down to which Andre Feely turns up for this fight? Would you agree?
I think I would absolutely agree. Yeah. I think the thing that I echo, actually, I think both of the Seans have really wrapped this fight up in a really nice nutshell. The thing that I always get the sense of with Feely is sometimes it feels like he forgets his own frame. He's very long, very gangly for the division. And sometimes he seems like he fights like a short man and ends up getting taken down and his shots are crowded and whatever. But again, when he's on, the footwork's beautiful and he uses his range well, and he's in well and he's out well. He scrambles well. He sprawls well. He re-enters on counter wrestling really, really nicely when he's on his game. It's the Donald Cerrone effect. It's just in that locker room. Is he there or is he not there? Because if he is, I don't think Anderson Brito will cause much problems. He's a big, strong guy that can grapple. Fine. It's not like Feely hasn't seen that before. It's not like even the bodies at Team Alpha Male. It's not like, you're not going to get big, strong guys that can grapple. And yeah, I do agree. I think we'll know very quickly, actually, if within the first minute, 2 minutes, he's on his back and he can't get up. I mean, we know which Andre Feely's come out tonight, right? But if he comes out and he's moving and he's shaking and his limbs are moving and he's cutting his angles and he's landing his shots, it's going to be hard for Anderson Brito to take him down, and it doesn't look like Anderson Brito's got much on the feet. Just to touch on the Team Alpha Male thing, I think running a gym and keeping a consistent batch of fighters coming through and cultivating those fighters is hard. Team Alpha Male was ravaged after the TJ Dillashaw split, and coaches and drama and this and that, and they sort of rebuilt and people are coming through. I think it's really hard to consistently churn out incredible fighters, UFC level, championship level, top 5 level fighters. And yeah, look, I think these things come in waves, and as you guys have already touched on, Song Yadong and others are coming through, and we'll see where we go. But it would be a shame to see Andre Feely turn into a Clay Guida, but I don't think Mr. Denny's too far away with that analysis if he doesn't turn a corner.
Yeah, indeed. Harry, I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to ask you to talk about Jared Gordon versus Grant Dawson. How did you see that fight going down?
It's a grappler versus a striker, really, isn't it? Grant Dawson on the feet against Leonardo Santos. Santos isn't great on the feet. We know what we're getting with Santos. We're getting a good grappler. But Santos was touching Dawson often. Dawson looked awkward on the feet. He was in there. He was fine, but he was also fighting a striker that's not great. He stuck to his game plan well, and that's a positive. But he was never able to get Santos down. He wasn't held down for a long period of time when Santos countered with Uchimatas and other hip throws and things like that. But the eventual finish came. Fine, he got it done. But it was worrying to me, right? It's worrying to me to see a guy who's had a couple of UFC fights now and still doesn't look super comfortable on the feet, doesn't seem to be able to mix it up well if the grappling isn't going well. And as Mr. Sheehan has told us numerous amounts of times, purely just grappling against the cage with no damage is not going to win you fights. And those first 2 rounds were pretty close because of that exact reason. Barely anything was landed. There was just lots of cage pressure. And for Jared Gordon, one of his Achilles heels is getting taken down, right? So the big question here is, could Jared Gordon keep it on the feet? If he can, I think he wins. If he can't, I think it's a pretty simple night for Grant Dawson.
100%, very well said. I move on to the next fight. Sean, you're a big fan of Sean Sheehan. You're a big fan of the next guy who's fighting on the main card, Darren Elkins, who takes on Tristan Connolly in the 145-pound division. You know, fucking, how could you not love Darren Elkins fights? I mean, we talked about journeyman, we talk about gatekeeper. I don't think he falls into the gatekeeper status, but he might just fall into one of the many subcategories of a journeyman. Would you agree with that?
I would. It's true. I think he's fantastic, you know, and he's one of those guys. Well, you know, myself and Harry did a podcast. Actually, I think it came out today about wins and losses and whether they should matter and stuff. And Michel Pereira is fighting Ponzinibbio in a few weeks, and it's very interesting. Obviously, you know, with Tristan Connolly here and where kind of they have both gone since that fight and how that loss to Pereira has really mattered. And he went from a guy that wins and losses don't really matter for him to now fighting Ponzinibbio, and he'd probably be ranked or close to it if he beats him. And Darren Elkins is one of those guys as well that I think, you know, we might remember his last couple of fights. We might remember if he won or lost them, but we damn sure remember that they were fun fucking fights if he was in them, you know? And that's what I want to see from a fighter for the most part. And that's, I think, what a lot of people want to see. Now we want to see the Demetrius Johnsons, the Kamaru Usmans, the Conor McGregors, the Khabib Nurmagomedovs and John Joneses as well, and GSPs, no doubt about it. But we also want to see the Diego Sanchez's, you know, we want to see the Joe Lozons, the Cerrones, the Darren Elkinses, and I love watching him fight. And I think Tristan Connolly is kind of one of those fighters as well, but maybe with not higher aspirations is the wrong way to put it, I suppose. But I think he's a guy who was a journeyman on the Canadian scene. I remember talking to Spencer about it, but he got that opportunity. He beat Michel Pereira. He's got some very tough matchmaking in UFC in I think it's his 3rd fight now. And this is a very interesting fight, I think, because like I think at this stage of Darren Elkins' career, it could go one of 2 ways. You know, he lost obviously badly to Cub Swanson there in the last fight. Like sometimes we see these fighters and their chin just takes a leap off of a cliff, and we never see him be able to take the damage like he has been able to take before. You know, it kind of happened to Diego Sanchez at one stage, but he popped back and he nearly beat Kevin Lee there a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, it can come back as well. But it'll be very interesting to see how that Cub Swanson fight affects him. Tristan Connolly is the type of guy who will come forward, will put pressure on, will land a lot of shots in Darren Elkins. And the difference, I think, with Tristan Connolly and a lot of other guys is I think he has the cardio to keep putting on that pressure, to keep putting on that damage in Darren Elkins, because a lot of people, myself and I think it was Harry, about the Mirsad Bektic fight on one of the podcasts we did during the week. A big issue for Bektic and other people as well when they fought Elkins is they won, and then they got tired. And then he drowns you because he doesn't get tired. He might be full of blood, but he's full of fucking oxygen too, as he is full of blood, and he can come forward and he can get you when you have gotten him beforehand. And, you know, as we see in MMA, whoever gets the person last is the one who wins. And I don't know if Tristan Connolly is going to be one of those guys that gets tired, that wilts a little bit, and struggles late in the fight. I think Elkins is a favorite here. I think I'd have Connolly the favorite, honestly. And I know everyone knows Darren Elkins is his team, Sheehan. But yeah, I think it'll be a great fight, and I'm looking forward to it. And with that, I have to go, lads. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks very much.
Good luck. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Sean was saying there. I mean, like with Tristan Connolly, came in, made his UFC debut against Michel Pereira, got the win, dropped down not 1, 2 weight classes, fought Pat Sabatini, who was a very, very good fighter, lost the decision in that fight. And yeah, this is his chance to come in and to get a good win over a good name and a well-known name too. But it's never easy against someone like Darren Elkins, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Sean Denny, I don't have to say Sean Sheehan and Sean Denny now, which is great. That always scratches me out. Talk to me about Gerald Meerschaert versus Krzysztof Jotko. I know you were saying before we started to record, Meerschaert has a couple of wins over some Polish rivals in the past, and he'll be looking for the hat-trick here.
Yeah, indeed. He beat both Bartosz Fabinski and Oskar Piechota. He beat them both by submission, so he's looking for his hat-trick. Harry could probably talk to you for hours about Meerschaert's BJJ. It's absolutely elite, and he can get on it from pretty much any area. And if you leave anything hanging out, it's bad news. Krzysztof Jotko, he's done a bit of trash talking today. He's accused Meerschaert of being a blanket. Don't know how you can say that because he's very aggressive, but I think he's going to need to use kickboxing here to try and stay away from Meerschaert. But I do worry for Jotko because he doesn't have a finishing threat. He can outpoint you, but he has to stay out of danger for Meerschaert for 3 full rounds. So I think my heart says Jotko, but I think Meerschaert's BJJ might just be the best skill that either of them have in this fight. And if you leave any window open, he's shown in the last 3 fights that he'll jump on it and he'll finish it.
100%. Sean Denny mentioned, Harry, that you talk all day about Gerald Meerschaert's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We don't have all day, but you do have a couple of minutes, and please.
Sure. Look, I think the craziest win for me that really shows the level of Meerschaert's grappling is Piechota, right? Piechota competed at ADCC, and for anyone that has an understanding of what ADCC is, it's essentially like the Olympics of grappling, right? So Oskar Piechota is a fantastic grappler, and Gerald Meerschaert managed to sub him, which is a crazy, crazy achievement if you really think about it. And for Meerschaert specifically, the thing that I like about his grappling, if you watch a lot of the more modern grapplers, let's take Claudio Puelles from last week, right? His movements are explosive. His movements are about timing, whereas Meerschaert is the old school grappler. He's like a Jacare Souza. He's like I've forgotten your man's name. A Verdum, right? Where they don't necessarily need timing. They're just like serpents. If they catch anything, and they'll force you to give them things, they're slow and methodical, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean that with the full extent of a compliment. They're slow, and they're tight, and they're mechanical, and you have no room to get out when you're in. And if Gerald Meerschaert is able to take Jotko down, or even if, Jesus, I hope this doesn't happen, but if he pulls guard or something similar, then, I mean, Jotko has very limited time in that octagon. And I think Denny is absolutely right. Jotko has to, the floor is lava, right? And he has to stay away.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the difference. I think you'll agree with me, Harry, between people that are fighters that have that elite level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is where you can set traps, you can lure your opponent into certain positions, and then one little slip at all, and they're on you like a leech. And we've seen that with Meerschaert time and time again. And fair play to him. He had an absolutely horrific time against Khamzat Chimaev, and he's bound. Yeah, they do. And he fought a real high level guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you know what? He didn't stay licking his wounds for too long. He got back in, and he's on a bit of a win streak now. And I really think he has a good chance in this fight too. But it won't be easy. It'll be the battle of who can stay on the feet. And Gerald Meerschaert will play around that a little bit. He'll try lure Krzysztof Jotko in, but ultimately he's going to be trying to take this fight down and submit Jotko. Next fight, we kind of spoke a little bit about it, Harry, last week, and I'm delighted. Obviously, the fight fell off. That's Alexander Ramanov versus Chase Sherman. Look, we spoke about it last week, Harry. We don't need to speak about it too much again. I'm going to go to Sean Sheehan and then get his opinion. this is a squash match. This is a showcase fight for Ramanov, and a fantastic heavyweight. You know, we spoke very highly of him last week, Sean. And what do you think of him? Do you think that this guy can be a major player in the heavyweight division?
Definitely. Like he's been doing his grappling competitions recently as well, which he's been dominating in. So he's one of those guys that has something different. In the heavyweights, you just get a lot of sluggers, like you'll see with your sort of Jake Collier's, Chase Sherman with a bit of boxing, Arlovsky sort of Jabaton. Romanov has that extra dimension where he can bring you down, he can submit you very quickly. He's got very heavy ground and pound, but he still has all the size where he's still a one-hitter quitter. So there might be some question marks over how good the fighters he's fought so far are. He definitely needs big tests along the way, and I don't think Chase Sherman is that. But he's got a lot of promise, and he's got that sort of Eastern European sort of grappling that you see out of the likes of Sergei Pishlushki out in SPG Nice, and he's going to be pretty good. I think the biggest test we'll see is if he can't get it to the ground and can he stay standing, and see how he does against the striker maybe.
Yeah, I think that this is just going to be a super easy fight. I think Ramanov is probably not going to want to play around too much on the feet because that's the only chance that Chase Sherman has to win this fight. And I think, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he fancies his chance at a knockout? I mean, Chase Sherman.
I think he'll do whatever I think he'll take whatever's there. I'm
looking at risk reward on the kind of it. Like, I mean, you're not going to see Sherman take him down and submit him or put him anywhere close to submission. I think anything, it'd be a lucky punch from Sherman if he caught him at all. But maybe that's the sign of a elite level fighter. We see, me and Sean did a podcast on John Jones recently, and what really Jones did back in the day was beat fighters at their own game just to prove himself and to prove his worth. So it'll be interesting to see for lack of a better term, whether Ramanov will take the easy way out and take him down, or will he try and show us that he has some knockout ability as well. Moving on to the next one, Francisco Figueiredo versus Daniel De Silva. Look at Francisco Figueiredo, brother of Dawson Figueiredo, flyweight champion. Look at when these two gentlemen were born. I think that Dawson Figueiredo hit the skills branches a little bit more than what Francisco did when it comes to ability and to fighting ability, at least anyway. I think you had that general consensus, Harry, before the podcast started as well. Not saying that he doesn't have a chance of winning this fight, but I mean, I think he's ceiling on he goes so far.
Absolutely. I mean, both of these lads aren't great, right? And that's no disrespect to them. It's just they're not elite level UFC fighters. Francisco, he tries to fight the same way as Figueiredo in that he stands similar and he tries to stalk the same way he does, but he doesn't have the same fight IQ. He doesn't have the same level of setups. He doesn't have the same level as power. And for Daniel De Silva, the Jeff Molina fight. Look, Jeff Molina's a tough out for your debut, right? He's absolutely no slouch, and he's never in a boring fight either. But it wasn't fantastic. And again, the card really, really falls off from here, and it will probably be a decent enough fight, but it's not great levels. It's not great levels.
Not at all. I would agree 100%. I think we'll throw out a couple of honorable mentions. We'll talk about maybe your fight of the night, and we'll jetson on. Johan Lenas, he fights Gabe Green. You'll know Lenas from taking on Justin Burlington, who is now scheduled to fight Reese McKee, Cage Warriors. Lenas got a nice knockout against Burlington in that fight. Throws heavy, throws wild, leaves himself open. It'll be interesting to see. I think he has the beatings of Gabe Green. Gabe Green is nothing to write home about. The opening fight of the night, Tatsura Taihara, undefeated Japanese flyweight who's coming in and making his UFC debut. Someone I'm interested in. I always love watching the flyweights. Fights long, fights rangy, lots of leg kicks, has some power in his hands, and has some good submission wins as well. 8 of his wins have come by finish. So it'll be interesting to see how he does when he goes in and fights Carlos Candelario, who also makes his UFC debut off the back of a loss on Dana White's Contender Series. Sean Denny, I know, yeah, it's crazy. But look, that's what we have. We have a big one next week, so we'll get through this one this week. Sean Denny, fight of the night. What are you thinking?
Very, very tough. Very tough. I'm gonna go for maybe Darren Elkins, Tristan Connolly.
That's a solid call. I mean, yeah, Harry is shaking his head. He doesn't even want to answer this question. I know by him.
No, look, I mean, I think Darren Elkins is obviously the absolute nailed on pick, right? I think Vera could be a lot of fun. I think if Vera turns up, I mean, in all the analysis I did, and you know, I watched quite a bit of tape and did quite a bit of thinking on Vera. And at the end of that, I was left thinking that this isn't really going to be all that close of a fight. I think Font is more powerful and far more technical and far more well-rounded. But Vera's tough, you know, and he's going to be up for this. If he wins this, he gets a big matchup. You know, if you go out and beat Font, then it's a good name. Font's obviously just fought Jose Aldo. So, you know, you're right up there then. And he's going to be up for it with that 40% hunger that he's got left, and maybe 35 by the time we get to fight week. But look, I think Darren Elkins is the pick, right? Jake Collier might make it fun against Arlovsky for as long as it lasts. But if Darren Elkins is on a card and we're talking about fight of the night, you don't look any further, do you? You know?
You certainly don't. It's either going to be that one or the main event. If the main event goes 5 rounds, it's likely that will get fight of the night. And there you have it, folks. Another one in the books. We'll be back next week for the Monster to UFC 274 card. Woo! I can't wait for that one. And I want to thank Sean Sheehan for joining me tonight. I want to thank Sean Denny. Follow him at Denny Rants on Twitter. Follow my man Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell over on Twitter. Follow me at IONeilMMA on Twitter. Check all of our shit out on SevereMMA.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you again next week. Goodbye.